I used to think the worst thing about working security at Nellis Air Force Base was the boredom. 12 hours of patrolling empty hallways, checking ID badges of tired airmen, and fighting to keep my eyes open. I was wrong. So fucking wrong. My name is James Cooper. 3 months ago, I was just another ex-military guy who couldn't quite adjust to civilian life. 4 years in the Marines left me with a bad knee, recurring nightmares, and just enough discipline to land a decent security contract job. The pay was good, the hours predictable, and nobody asked questions when I flinched at loud noises. It started with the accident in July. Major Thomas Reynolds, one of the senior research officers at the base, drove his car off Route 93 and into a ravine. No alcohol, no drugs, no mechanical failure. The official report claimed he fell asleep at the wheel. His colleagues whispered otherwise. "Cooper, you're on special assignment tonight." My supervisor, Ramirez, handed me a clipboard with unfamiliar clearance papers. Section 7B needs coverage. Regular guy called in sick. Section 7B. Even the name sent an odd ripple through the other guards in the break room. Nobody said anything, but I caught the glances. "What's in 7B?" I asked, scanning the unusual authorization codes on the paperwork. Ramirez shrugged. "Above my pay grade, some research facility. Been active lately, lots of late nights. Just follow their protocols, don't ask questions, and for God's sake, don't touch anything." I nodded, signed the forms, and tried to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. Extra clearance meant extra pay, and I needed the money. That night, as I drove deeper into the restricted areas of the base, past the regular checkpoints and into parts I'd never seen before, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The desert night felt colder somehow, the stars dimmer, as if something was pressing down on the very air around me. A lieutenant I'd never seen before met me at the final checkpoint. His uniform was impeccable, but his eyes were bloodshot, darting nervously as he verified my clearance. "First time in 7B?" he asked, handing back my ID. "Yes, sir." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "These are the additional protocols for tonight's shift. Memorize them, follow them exactly, no exceptions." I took the paper, expecting the usual bureaucratic nonsense. Instead, I found 7 handwritten rules, numbered neatly. Remain at your station unless directly ordered otherwise by Dr. Mercer. Maintain video surveillance at all times. If cameras 3, 5, or 7 go offline, notify Dr. Mercer immediately. No electronic devices beyond this point, no exceptions. If you hear your name called, confirm visual ID before responding. In case of power failure, use only the emergency lighting system. Do not use flashlights. If you see any unauthorized personnel, do not approach. Call Dr. Mercer. If you hear knocking from storage room C, ignore it. Do not open the door under any circumstances. I looked up, a question forming on my lips, but the lieutenant was already walking away, his shoulders tense beneath his uniform. "Sir," I called after him, "what's in storage room C?" He stopped, but didn't turn around. "Nothing," he said after a moment. "There's nothing in there at all." As the security door to Section 7B hissed open before me, I couldn't have known that within 12 hours, 3 people would be dead, and I would be fighting for my sanity, and for yours. Section 7B looked nothing like the rest of the base. The typical military efficiency, all straight lines and labelled doors, gave way to a labyrinth of curved corridors with recessed lighting that cast everything in a bluish glow. The air tasted metallic, recycled through too many filters. The security desk sat at a junction where 3 hallways met. Built into the wall was a bank of monitors displaying feeds from various cameras throughout the facility. A bulky 3-ring binder labelled protocols rested beside a telephone with no dial pad, just a single red button. "You must be Cooper." The voice came from behind me. I turned to find a tall, gaunt man in a white lab coat. His ID badge identified him as Dr. Everett Mercer, Research Director. "Yes, sir, James Cooper, reporting for security duty." His eyes, magnified by thick glasses, studied me like I was a specimen under a microscope. "Have you been briefed on the protocols?" I pulled out the folded paper with the 7 rules. "Just these, sir." He took the paper, examined it, then handed it back. "Good. Those are the essentials. The rest is in the binder. I suggest you familiarize yourself with it immediately." His voice was flat, clinical. "My team will be working through the night. You are not to interrupt unless it's an emergency as defined in Section 3 of the Protocol Manual." "Understood, sir. One more thing." He hesitated, fingers drumming against his thigh. "Time works differently here sometimes. If you notice any discrepancies on your watch or the wall clock, ignore them. It's a known issue with the equipment we're using." Before I could ask what the hell that meant, he was gone, disappearing down the central corridor. I settled into the chair and opened the protocol binder. Most of it was standard security procedures, but there were oddities. An entire section on temporal anomalies, another on containment breach procedures. The language shifted between military jargon and terms I'd never encountered before, reality stabilization and dimensional variance thresholds. At 2200 hours, I began my first rounds. The route was simple, down each of the 3 corridors, checking that all doors were secure. The central corridor led to a large laboratory where Mercer and 3 other scientists hunched over equipment I couldn't begin to understand. They barely acknowledged me. The left corridor housed offices and what looked like a break room, all empty at this hour. The right corridor ended at storage room C, a heavy steel door with multiple locks and a keypad, no window, no sound, just a small sign. Authorized personnel only. I remembered Rule 7. If you hear knocking from storage room C, ignore it. Do not open the door under any circumstances. What the hell were they keeping in there? Back at the security desk, I watched the monitors. Camera 5 showed the interior of the main lab. The scientists had gathered around something that looked like a metal archway. Green lights flickered along its frame. At precisely 23:17, the lights throughout the facility dimmed momentarily. On the monitor, the archway pulsed with a strange, rippling light. The scientists stepped back, making notes on their tablets. One of them, younger than the others, with a shock of red hair, looked directly at the camera. His expression made my skin crawl. Pure, undiluted fear. By midnight, my watch had stopped. The wall clock continued ticking, but when I checked my phone, violating Rule 3, but I was getting nervous, it was dead despite being fully charged when I arrived. At 0100, according to the wall clock, I made my second round. The scientists were still working, but they moved with a strange mechanical precision now. Dr. Mercer stood before the archway, hands raised as if in worship, lips moving in what looked like silent prayer. The temperature dropped noticeably in the hallway leading to storage room C. My breath fogged in front of my face. As I approached the door, a sound stopped me dead in my tracks. Knock, knock, knock. 3 soft taps, like knuckles on wood. But the door was steel. Knock, knock, knock. The sound came again, a little louder. I remembered Rule 7 and turned to leave. "Cooper." My name, whispered from behind the door. The voice sounded familiar somehow. "James Cooper. Help me." Rule 4. If you hear your name called, confirm visual ID before responding. But how could I get visual confirmation through a solid door? I reached for the radio at my belt, intending to call Mercer. "Don't call him," the voice said, as if reading my thoughts. "He put me in here, after the accident." A chill ran down my back. "Who are you?" "Thomas Reynolds. Major Thomas Reynolds. They said I died, didn't they? Car accident on Route 93. My mouth went dry. The supposedly dead officer from the accident in July. "You're not real," I said, backing away. The voice changed then, becoming something else. Something that made my ears hurt and my vision blur. "I am more real than this place you call reality, James Cooper. And soon, very soon, I will show you." I ran back to the security desk, heart pounding. When I checked the monitors, camera 7, the one pointed at storage room C, showed only static. Rule 2. If cameras 3, 5, or 7 go offline, Notify Dr. Mercer immediately. My finger hovered over the red button. Then I glanced at the monitor showing the lab. The archway was fully illuminated now, the center filled with a swirling darkness that seemed to bend the light around it. Dr. Mercer stood before it, arms outstretched, face upturned in ecstasy. And behind him, watching from the shadows, was a figure I recognized from news photos, Major Thomas Reynolds. But he was looking directly at the camera, directly at me, and he was smiling. My finger pressed the red button. The red button triggered no alarm, no flashing lights, just a soft, acknowledging beep. 30 seconds later, Dr. Mercer's voice came through a speaker I hadn't noticed before. Security report. I hesitated, eyes flicking between the monitor showing Mercer in the lab and the one displaying static where storage room C should be. In the lab feed, there was no sign of Major Reynolds. Had I imagined it? Camera 7 is down, I finally said, keeping my voice even. And I heard something from storage room C. A long pause. Then, I'll be right there. Do not leave your station. When Mercer arrived, he was alone. No sign of the other scientists. His lab coat was rumpled, and a thin sheen of sweat glistened on his forehead. "What exactly did you hear?" he asked, leaning against the desk. "Knocking," I said. 3 knocks, repeated twice. His expression didn't change, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the desk. "Anything else?" I thought about the voice claiming to be Reynolds, about the figure I'd seen on the monitor. Something told me to hold back. "Just the knocking." And then the camera went offline. Mercer studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "It's a pressure issue. The storage room contains sensitive equipment that can cause acoustic anomalies. The camera probably crashed because of power fluctuations from the main lab. We're running a significant experiment tonight." It was bullshit, and we both knew it, but I nodded anyway. "I need to get back to the lab," he said. "We're at a critical juncture. Stay at your post, follow the protocols. If anything else happens, anything at all, use the button again." After he left, I reviewed the security footage from the past hour. When I reached the moment I'd seen Reynolds in the lab, there was nothing. Just Mercer standing alone before the archway. The footage had been altered. At 200 hours, the young scientist with red hair approached my desk. His badge identified him as Dr. Adam Wells, research associate. "You're new," he said, eyes darting nervously down the corridor. "Listen, I don't have much time. Mercer's occupied with calibrations for the next phase." "The next phase of what?" I asked. He glanced over his shoulder. "They call it Project Threshold. It started as a theoretical physics experiment, quantum tunneling, string theory, that sort of thing. But about 8 months ago, they achieved something impossible." He lowered his voice to a whisper. "They opened a doorway." "A doorway to what?" "Somewhere else, another reality, maybe, or another dimension. The physics are beyond anything we understand." His hands trembled slightly. "Major Reynolds was the project's military liaison. He was there the first time they stabilized the aperture. He saw something. Started talking about voices, about being watched. I remembered the accident report. And then he drove off Route 93. Wells shook his head. "That's the official story. Truth is, he tried to shut down the project, said it wasn't safe, that we were being reckless. The next day, he disappeared. They told us he died in an accident, but..." He trailed off, eyes wide and haunted. "You think they did something to him?" "I think something came through. Something that wasn't supposed to be here. And I think it's still here." A chill settled in my stomach. "In storage room C." He nodded, then stiffened as a crackling sound came over the PA system. "He's starting the next test. I have to go." He turned to leave, then stopped. Whatever you do, don't... The lights went out. Complete darkness enveloped the facility, so thick it felt tangible. Then, slowly, the emergency lights came on, dim reddish bulbs that cast long shadows down the corridors. Rule 5. In case of power failure, use only the emergency lighting system. Do not use flashlights. The monitor bank remained dark. Without the camera feeds, I was blind to whatever was happening in the lab or anywhere else in the facility. "Dr. Wells," I called out, but he was already gone. From the direction of the lab came a low, reverberating hum, like the deepest note of a cello stretched out indefinitely. The air felt charged, heavy with potential energy. Then came the screaming. Not one voice, but many. A cacophony of terror that echoed through the corridors. I grabbed the baton from my belt and started toward the lab. Rules be damned. Halfway there, the screaming stopped, cut off as suddenly as it had begun. The humming intensified, building to a painful crescendo that made my teeth vibrate in my skull. Then a shockwave of something rippled through the facility. I was thrown against the wall, the breath knocked from my lungs. The emergency lights flickered wildly, casting strobing shadows that seemed to move independently of any source. When I regained my footing, the humming had subsided to a gentle, almost musical tone. The main lights flickered back on, though dimmer than before. My radio crackled to life. "Security, report to the main lab immediately." It was Mercer's voice, but different somehow. Tighter, controlled in a way that suggested he was barely holding himself together. I approached the lab cautiously. The door was ajar, spilling harsh blue light into the corridor. Inside, chaos reigned. Equipment lay scattered and broken. One of the wall monitors had shattered, glass fragments glittering on the floor. The archway still stood, but it was dark now, the green lights extinguished. Dr. Mercer stood with his back to me, surveying the wreckage. Of the other scientists, there was no sign. "What happened?" I asked. "Where's Dr. Wells and the others?" "There was a containment breach," Mercer said without turning. "A miscalculation. The aperture destabilized momentarily." "The screaming was nothing." He turned then, and I took an involuntary step back. His face was the same, but his eyes were wrong, too dark, too deep, as if I was looking into empty space rather than at a human being. A simple equipment malfunction that sounded like human vocalization. "Dr. Wells and the others have gone to secure the backup systems." It was a lie. I knew it with bone-deep certainty. "Now," he continued, "I need you to perform a security sweep of the entire facility. Check all rooms, all corridors. If you see any anomalies, report them immediately. Do not approach, do not engage. Rule 6. If you see any unauthorized personnel, do not approach. Call Dr. Mercer." "What kind of anomalies?" I asked, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You'll know them when you see them." As I turned to begin my sweep, a movement caught my eye, a brief flicker in the reflection of one of the intact monitors. For just an instant, I saw Dr. Mercer's reflection, but it wasn't a man in a lab coat. It was something else, something with too many angles, too many limbs. When I spun back, he was normal again, watching me expectantly. "Is there a problem, Officer Cooper?" "No," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. "No problem at all." As I walked away, the weight of the lies between us hung in the air like a physical presence. Whatever had happened in that lab, whatever had come through that archway, I was now trapped with it in a maze of steel and concrete, guided only by 7 rules that suddenly seemed woefully inadequate. And somewhere in the facility, something that wasn't Dr. Mercer waited for me to make a mistake. My security sweep began at the far end of the left corridor, the offices and break room. Everything seemed normal at first. Empty desks, cold coffee cups, half-finished reports, the mundane detritus of scientific work. But small details were off. A clock running backward. A coffee mug hovering half an inch above the desk. A pencil that kept rolling uphill. In one office, the nameplate read, "Dr. A. Wells." I found signs of a struggle. Papers scattered across the floor, a chair overturned, and on the desk, a journal lying open to a page filled with frantic handwriting. October 17th. It's happening again. The aperture is becoming unstable even when powered down. M claims it's a breakthrough, but I've seen the readings. The quantum field distortions are spreading beyond the containment area. Reality is thinning around us. October 19th. Reynolds was right. We should never have pushed past the initial parameters. M is obsessed with making contact, but the entity on the other side isn't what he thinks. It's using him, using us all. October 21st. I'm documenting everything here in case something happens to me. The security guard tonight looks competent, military background. If you're reading this, the entry cut off mid-sentence, the pen trailing off into a jagged line that tore through the page. A soft sound behind me made me spin around, baton raised. The office was empty, but the door had closed. I tried the handle, locked. I hadn't heard a click. Something pressed against the other side of the door. Not a knock, but a steady pressure, as if someone leaned their full weight against it. The wood began to bend inward, impossibly like rubber. I backed toward the window. Outside, the Nevada desert glowed silver under the moon. Safety was just a shattered pane of glass away. The door bulged further, the wood grain stretching like skin. Then my radio crackled. "Officer Cooper, report your position." Mercer's voice, strained and impatient. The pressure on the door ceased immediately. The wood snapped back to normal. "Left corridor, office area," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Completing sweep, now. Return to the security desk immediately. We have a situation." When I tried the door again, it opened easily. The corridor beyond was empty, shadows pooling in the corners where the emergency lights didn't quite reach. As I walked back, I passed a door I didn't remember seeing before. It was unnumbered, unmarked, partially ajar. From inside came a soft, rhythmic sound, like breathing, but too regular, too mechanical. Rule 6 said not to approach unauthorized personnel, but mentioned nothing about unexpected rooms. Professional curiosity, or maybe just stupidity, made me push the door open slightly. The room beyond shouldn't have existed. It was vast, far larger than the building's exterior would allow, and it was filled with rows upon rows of transparent cylinders, each containing a floating humanoid shape. The nearest cylinder held what appeared to be Dr. Wells. His eyes were open but unseeing, body suspended in a clear liquid. Tubes ran from his nose and mouth to the top of the chamber. His chest rose and fell with that same mechanical rhythm I heard. Beside him was another scientist I recognized from the lab, and beside her, another, dozens of them, all connected to machines that pulsed with the same green light as the archway, and at the far end, barely visible in the dim light, a cylinder containing Major Thomas Reynolds. I backed away, bile rising in my throat. Whatever Mercer was doing here, whatever Project Threshold really was, it had nothing to do with theoretical physics. When I turned to leave, Dr. Mercer stood in the doorway. "Curiosity is a dangerous trait in a security officer," he said, his voice eerily calm. "What is this place?" I demanded. "What have you done to them?" "Nothing they didn't volunteer for." He stepped into the room, forcing me to back up. "The human mind is remarkable, Cooper. So adaptable, so resilient, but ultimately limited by its physical housing. You're experimenting on them." A smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm liberating them. The aperture requires anchors, consciousnesses that can remain here while also existing there, bridges between realities." "Reynolds didn't volunteer," I said. "He tried to stop you." Thomas had a moment of weakness, of fear. They all do initially. But he's come to understand the importance of our work. Mercer's eyes gleamed in the green light from the cylinders, As will you. I bolted for the door, shoving him aside with more force than necessary. He was surprisingly light, almost insubstantial, crumpling against the wall like an empty suit. By the time I reached the corridor, alarm klaxons were blaring throughout the facility. Red warning lights pulsed in sync with an automated announcement. Containment breach in progress. All personnel evacuate immediately. Repeat, containment breach in progress. I ran toward the security desk, hoping to retrieve the binder of protocols. There had to be emergency procedures, a way to shut down whatever Mercer had started. The main junction was in chaos. The white walls rippled as if made of liquid. The floor undulated beneath my feet, and hanging in the center of the space, about 7 feet off the ground, was what looked like a tear in the air itself, a jagged vertical split through which I could see nothing. Not darkness, but a complete absence of anything recognizable. The rift pulsed, expanding slightly with each throb, and with each expansion came a sound, like distant voices, wailing in pain or ecstasy, impossible to tell. I reached the security desk and grabbed the protocol binder. Flipping frantically through the pages, I found a section titled Critical Containment Failure. The instructions were simple, terrifying. Proceed to the main laboratory. Initiate full shutdown of the aperture control system. If shutdown fails, activate the emergency purge protocol. Evacuate immediately. Below that, in red text, note, emergency purge will result in complete molecular destabilization of all organic matter within containment zone. Use only as last resort. As I closed the binder, my eyes fell on a monitor that had flickered back to life. It showed storage room C, the door vibrating violently, bolts straining against some immense pressure from within. I knew what I had to do. The main lab with its archway, the aperture, was the source of whatever was happening. If I could shut it down. The route to the lab took me past storage room C. As I approached, the vibrations grew stronger, the floor itself trembling beneath my boots. The door bulged outward, the metal groaning in protest. Rule 7. If you hear knocking from storage room C, ignore it. Do not open the door under any circumstances. But there was no knocking now. Just a relentless pressure that threatened to tear the door from its hinges. As I passed, a voice called out, not from behind the door, but from the air beside me. James. I froze. It was my father's voice. James, help me. My father had died of cancer when I was 19, wasting away in a VA hospital bed. His voice had been the last thing I heard before shipping out to basic training. A voice I'd never thought I'd hear again. You're not real, I whispered. I'm as real as anything in this place, the voice replied. As real as you. As real as the thing wearing Mercer's skin. What is it? What's happening here? They opened a door they couldn't close. Invited in something that doesn't belong here. Something that wants to remake this reality in its image. How do I stop it? You can't. My father's voice was sad, resigned. Not anymore. The breach is too wide. But you can still save yourself. There's a way out. The emergency purge protocol. A sound like distant laughter. That won't work. The entity is already beyond physical containment. But I can help you. Open the door, James. Let me out. I hesitated, hand halfway to the door's keypad. How do you know my name? How are you speaking with my father's voice? The voice changed, became something inhuman. A chorus of sounds that hurt my ears and made my vision swim. I know everything about you, James Cooper. I have been watching you through the spaces between realities for longer than you can comprehend. Open the door. I backed away, heart hammering in my chest. Whatever was in storage room C wasn't my father, wasn't human at all. At that moment, the door to the main lab burst open. Dr. Mercer stumbled out, his lab coat torn and bloody. But this was different from the Mercer I'd spoken to earlier. This one's eyes were human, wide with terror and desperation. Cooper, he gasped. Thank God. You need to activate the purge. The aperture's collapsing. Reality barriers breaking down." "Who are you?" I demanded, baton raised defensively. "The real Mercer or whatever's pretending to be him?" He blinked in confusion, then understanding dawned. "It's mimicking people, creating duplicates from our memories, our fears. I thought we had it contained in storage room C, but it's growing stronger." "What is it?" "We don't know. Something from beyond our universe. Something that's been trying to get through since we first opened the aperture 8 months ago." He shuddered. Reynolds was the first to realize. It got into his head, made him see things, hear things. We thought he was having a breakdown. "But he was right," I said. Mercer nodded grimly. "By the time we understood, it was too late. It had already created a foothold, a presence on our side. We managed to contain part of it, but the rest..." He gestured vaguely around us. "It's been hiding in plain sight, watching, waiting, and now it's making its move." From behind us, from the direction of storage room C, came a deafening screech of tearing metal. The lights flickered wildly, then stabilized. Mercer's face went ashen. "We're out of time. Get to the lab. Activate the purge. I'll try to slow it down." Before I could argue, he pressed a keycard into my hand and ran towards storage room C, pulling a strange, gun-like device from inside his coat. As I sprinted toward the lab, the walls around me began to blur and shift, straight lines bending into impossible curves. Reality itself was coming undone. And close behind me, I could hear footsteps that hit the floor at irregular intervals, as if whatever followed had too many legs, moving in a pattern no human could replicate. The main lab was unrecognizable from just hours before. Equipment lay shattered across the floor, monitors displayed impossible readings, negative numbers, symbols I'd never seen before, sequences that changed even as I watched. The air itself seemed thicker here, harder to breathe, like being underwater. And dominating it all was the archway, the aperture. It was active now, but not in the controlled way I'd glimpsed earlier. The metal frame pulsed with sickly green light that seemed to drain color from everything around it. The space within the arch no longer showed the swirling darkness I'd seen before. Instead, it revealed something else. A landscape that hurt to look at directly, angles that shouldn't exist, colors that had no names, structures that the human mind couldn't properly process. At the base of the aperture lay a body. The red-haired scientist, the real Adam Wells. His eyes were open and empty, mouth frozen in a silent scream. His right arm reached toward a control panel nearby, fingers just inches from a large red button labeled Emergency Shutdown. I stepped carefully around his body and approached the panel. It was unexpectedly simple. The shutdown button, a keycard slot, and a numeric keypad. I slid Mercer's card through the reader. The screen lit up with a message. Emergency shutdown requires authorization. Enter 6-digit code and biometric confirmation. I didn't have the code. And even if I did, the system probably needed Mercer's fingerprint. On a nearby desk, a tablet still functioned. I grabbed it, hoping for information, access codes, anything that might help. The screen showed a log of recent communications. The last one, timestamped just 20 minutes ago, was from Wells to someone named Director Harlow. Containment failing. Entity has compromised Mercer, creating duplicates of personnel. Reynolds was right. It's been manipulating us from the beginning. Aperture is becoming self-sustaining. Request immediate military intervention. Emergency code 471969. 6 digits. Worth a try. Behind me, the aperture pulsed more intensely. The air around it rippled like heat waves, and for an instant, I saw something move on the other side, a vast shape shifting in that impossible landscape. I punched the code into the keypad, 471969. Code accepted. Biometric confirmation required. Damn it. I glanced at Wells's body, a desperate idea forming. Would the system accept his biometric signature? He was authorized personnel. I grabbed his lifeless arm, trying not to think about what I was doing, and pressed his hand against the scanner beside the keypad. Nothing happened. "It won't work," said a voice behind me. "The system needs a living signature." I turned to find Dr. Mercer, or something wearing his appearance, standing in the doorway. Blood streaked his lab coat, but he showed no signs of injury. "The other you said you were compromised," I said, backing toward the control panel, keeping my eyes on him. He smiled thinly. "And you believed it, just as Reynolds believed the voices in his head, just as Wells believed he could warn the outside world." He stepped into the room, movements too smooth, too controlled. "The entity doesn't compromise. It elevates. It completes. What happened to the real Mercer? I am the real Mercer." He tapped his temple. "Improved, enhanced, seeing beyond the limitations of human perception." "And the thing in storage room C?" "A fragment, a seed, the first piece that came through 8 months ago when we activated the aperture." His smile widened. "We thought we contained it. In reality, it contained itself willingly. Growing. Waiting." With each word, he moved closer. I noticed his shadow on the wall wasn't matching his movements. It was larger, shaped differently, with too many appendages. "And now what?" I asked, trying to keep him talking while I felt behind me for anything useful on the control panel. "It takes over Earth?" He laughed, a sound that fractured midway into something that wasn't laughter at all. "Takes over?" "Number, you misunderstand. It doesn't want your planet or your resources, it wants your reality. The physical laws that govern this universe are convenient for what it needs to grow, to evolve." My fingers found a switch on the panel, covered by a plastic guard. The label beside it read, "Purge Initiation." "And you're helping it?" I kept my tone conversational, flicking the guard open with my thumb. "I'm helping us transcend." His eyes had changed, the pupils elongating vertically like a cat's. "Humanity is a dead end, Cooper. A species that will destroy itself given enough time. The entity offers something greater, a fusion of consciousnesses, a collective that spans multiple realities. Like what you did to Wells and the others, those tanks of floating bodies. Necessary steps, anchors to stabilize the coming merger." He was only feet away now. "You could join us. Your military background, your adaptive thinking, you'd make an excellent anchor." "I think I'll pass." His face hardened. "It wasn't an offer. It was courtesy." He lunged forward with inhuman speed. I slammed my hand down on the purge button. Nothing happened. Mercer's hand closed around my throat, lifting me off the ground with impossible strength. "Did you really think we wouldn't disable the purge systems? The entity has been preparing for this moment for months." Black spots danced at the edges of my vision as his grip tightened. In desperation, I swung the tablet still clutched in my other hand, smashing it against the side of his head. He didn't flinch, didn't even blink, but the impact knocked something loose from inside his coat. A small, metallic object that clattered to the floor. A security badge. The real Mercer's badge, with what looked like a thumbprint scanner built into its surface. I kicked out, connecting with Mercer's knee. It bent backward, impossibly, but his grip loosened enough for me to break free. I dove for the badge, fingers closing around the cold metal as I rolled across the floor. Mercer was on me in an instant, his weight pressing me down, hands closing around my throat again. Up close, his face was changing, skin rippling as features shifted beneath it. "You can't stop this," he hissed, voice modulating between human and something else. "The breach is beyond your capacity to seal." With the last of my strength, I brought the badge up to the biometric scanner beside the keypad, pressing my thumb against Mercer's imprint. Biometric match confirmed. Emergency purge initiated. Evacuate immediately. T-minus 60 seconds. Mercer's grip loosened in surprise. I twisted free, driving my knee up into his midsection. He made a strange, hollow sound and staggered back. The aperture began to pulse frantically, the light within it shifting from green to a deep, angry red. The automated voice continued its countdown. T-minus 50 seconds. I scrambled to my feet and ran for the door. Behind me, Mercer recovered and gave chase, moving with a strange, multi-jointed gait that ate up the distance between us. I slammed the lab door shut as I exited, jamming my baton through the handle to buy a few seconds. It wouldn't hold him long. The corridor outside was in chaos. The walls rippled like liquid, floors buckling. Gravity itself seemed inconsistent, objects floating, then crashing down, then sliding sideways. T-minus 40 seconds. I sprinted toward the exit, trying to remember the evacuation route from the protocol binder. The security desk was gone, swallowed by a churning vortex of matter that twisted through what had been the main junction. The klaxons continued to wail, almost drowning out a new sound. A tearing, splintering noise from the direction of storage room C. I risked a glance back. The door had been ripped from its frame, metal twisted like paper. Emerging from the blackness beyond was something. Not a single entity, but a writhing mass of shapes and forms that constantly shifted and reformed, like living smoke that suggested limbs, faces, bodies, only to dissolve and reconfigure. At its edges, I glimpsed what looked like parts of the missing scientists. A hand here, a face there, all melded into the greater whole. T-minus 30 seconds. I pushed on, lungs burning, legs leaden. The exit had to be nearby. The corridors twisted unnaturally, branching where they shouldn't, doubling back on themselves. Reality breaking down as the entity's influence spread. Behind me came Mercer's voice, no longer entirely human. You can't escape, Cooper. There's nowhere to go. This reality is already compromised. T-minus 20 seconds. The final security door appeared ahead, massive and reinforced, designed to seal the facility in case of emergency. It was already closing, hydraulic pistons driving it inexorably shut. I threw myself forward, sliding beneath the descending barrier with inches to spare. It slammed closed behind me with a pneumatic hiss. T-minus 10 seconds. I was in an austere concrete corridor that sloped upward toward what looked like daylight. I ran, legs pumping, every muscle screaming in protest. Behind me, something massive impacted the security door. The metal bulged inward, a human-shaped handprint appearing in the solid steel as if it were clay. 5 ... Nanga 3 dots, 2 dots, 1 inch. The world went white. A blast wave threw me forward, heat searing my back as I tumbled up the sloped corridor. My ears rang, vision blurred. The concrete beneath me trembled like a living thing, cracks spreading in fractal patterns. I must have blacked out. When I came to, dust filled the air, illuminated by emergency lights that cast everything in a sickly red glow. The security door behind me was gone. In its place, a smoking crater of twisted metal and crumbling concrete. Beyond it, where Section 7B had been, was only darkness. My body felt wrong. Every movement brought sharp electric pain shooting along my nerves. My watch had stopped again. The glass cracked, hands frozen at 3:07. I had no idea how long I'd been unconscious. I stumbled upward toward the promise of exit, one hand against the wall for support. The concrete felt strange beneath my fingers, too warm, almost pulsing. When I pulled my hand away, my fingerprints remained visible for a moment before slowly fading, as if the wall were absorbing them. Finally, I reached what looked like an emergency exit, a heavy metal door with a push bar. Daylight filtered through narrow windows on either side. I shoved against the bar, desperate for fresh air, for normality. The door opened onto the Nevada desert. Dawn painted the sky in bands of orange and purple. Wind whispered through scrub brush. Everything looked normal. Blessedly, impossibly normal. I staggered outside, gulping fresh air. About 200 yards away stood a perimeter fence topped with razor wire. Beyond that, a parking lot where a few cars still waited. My car. Safety. I'd made it 10 steps when I realized something was wrong. The desert was silent. No birds, no insects, no distant hum of air traffic from Nellis, just the wind. And the shadows didn't match the rising sun. They stretched in the wrong direction at impossible angles. I kept walking anyway. What choice did I have? Behind me lay only destruction. Ahead, at least the illusion of escape. At the fence, I found a gate with a keycard reader. My own ID had no clearance for this exit, but Mercer's badge, somehow still clutched in my bloodied hand, might work. I swiped it through the reader. The gate unlocked with a metallic click. As I pushed it open, I noticed something odd about Mercer's badge. The photo was changing, the face shifting subtly between one blink and the next. First Mercer, then Wells, then what looked like Reynolds, then other faces I didn't recognize. I dropped it like it had burned me and hurried through the gate. My car was where I'd left it, a dusty blue sedan among a handful of other vehicles. The normalcy of it, just an ordinary car in an ordinary parking lot, nearly broke me. I leaned against the hood, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. That's when I noticed the rearview mirror was facing outward, not toward the driver's seat where it should be. I distinctly remembered adjusting it before my shift. Someone had been in my car. Cautiously, I approached the driver's side window and peered inside. The interior looked undisturbed. My coffee cup still sat in the holder, half empty from yesterday. My jacket lay across the passenger seat where I'd tossed it. But there was a piece of paper on the dashboard that hadn't been there before, a folded note. I tried the door. Unlocked. I reached in and grabbed the note, then backed away from the car, some instinct warning me against getting in just yet. The note was written in a tidy, precise hand. Cooper. If you're reading this, the purge protocol activated successfully. That's good, but not enough. What happened in Section 7B wasn't an accident or a mistake. It was the culmination of decades of research. Project Threshold began in 1969, not 8 months ago. We've been opening doors, looking into other realities for over 50 years. This wasn't the first breach, just the biggest. The entity is wounded, contained again for now, but not destroyed. Never destroyed. It exists across multiple realities simultaneously. The version here has been damaged, but it's already rebuilding itself. Some of it escaped before the purge. In you. Check your reflection. Check your shadow. They won't match anymore. That's how it starts. There's a failsafe, a way to excise its influence before it spreads. But you need to act quickly. Go to the Sundown Motel on Route 93, Room 17. Everything you need is there. Don't trust anyone. Don't talk to anyone. And whatever you do, don't sleep. Sleep allows it to spread faster. T.R. Thomas Reynolds. The supposedly dead officer who had tried to warn everyone about the dangers of the project. I crushed the note in my fist, heart racing. Was this real or another trick? The entity had used Reynolds' voice before, had created duplicates of people. This could be another trap. But what choice did I have? I looked at my reflection in the car window. My face stared back, haggard and dirt-smeared, but normal. Then I looked at my shadow on the ground beside me. It wasn't human-shaped anymore. The edges were blurred, undefined, and there were appendages extending from its outline. Tentacle-like projections that moved slightly in a wind I couldn't feel. Jesus Christ, I whispered, backing away from my own shadow. I looked back at my reflection. For a split second, something else looked back. My face, but with eyes like empty wells, a mouth stretched too wide. Then, it was just me again. Terrified, shaking me. I had to get to the Sundown Motel. Had to find out what Reynolds had left there. Had to fix this before whatever was inside me took hold completely. Despite my fear of entering the car, I had no choice. I slid into the driver's seat, hands trembling so badly I could barely insert the key. The engine started normally. The dashboard lit up. The radio came on, playing static. I switched it off and pulled out of the parking lot, tires kicking up dust as I accelerated away from Section 7B from Nellis. From the nightmare behind me, or inside me, Route 93 stretched ahead, empty in the early morning light. My eyes kept darting to the rearview mirror, checking my reflection, then back to the road. Each time my face seemed a little less mine. The angle's wrong, the expression's unfamiliar. I rolled down all the windows, letting the desert air blast against my skin. The cold helped keep me alert. According to the note, sleep would accelerate whatever was happening to me. How long had it been since I'd slept? I'd started my shift at 2100 hours the previous night. It was now dawn, so at least 12 hours. With adrenaline fading, fatigue pressed against my consciousness like a physical weight. 10 miles down, Route 93, I saw the sign for the Sundown Motel, a rundown roadside establishment that had seen better days. The neon sign was partially burnt out, reading only Sundown Motel in flickering red letters. The parking lot was nearly empty, just 2 other cars. I parked as close to room 17 as possible and got out, legs stiff and aching. The door to room 17 was ajar. I approached cautiously, every instinct screaming that this was a trap. Through the gap, I could see a standard motel room, queen bed, cheap dresser, TV mounted on the wall. Normal, except for the walls. Every inch of wall space was covered with papers, photographs, diagrams, all connected by red string. A conspiracy theorist's dream board times 10. I pushed the door open fully and stepped inside. The room smelled musty, unused. Dust motes danced in the sunlight filtering through closed curtains. On the bed lay a metal briefcase and another note. This one read simply, "Look at everything first. Understand before you open the case." I turned to the nearest wall. It was covered with newspaper clippings dating back to the late 1960s. Headlines jumped out at me. Strange lights reported near Groom Lake. 3 scientists missing from top secret facility. Unexplained radiation spike detected in Nevada desert. Interspersed with the clippings were what looked like classified documents, reports, memos, personnel files. Many were redacted, black lines obscuring crucial information, but enough remained to paint a disturbing picture. Project Threshold had begun in 1969, an offshoot of research into quantum physics and parallel dimensions. The initial breakthrough came when scientists discovered what they called thin spots, places where the barriers between realities were naturally weaker. One such spot existed beneath what would later become Section 7B at Nellis Air Force Base. By 1972, they had developed technology to peer through these thin spots. By 1985, they could open temporary doorways. By 1997, they had made contact with something on the other side. The entity. A photograph showed what appeared to be the first version of the aperture, cruder than the one I'd seen, but recognizably the same technology. In front of it stood a group of scientists and military personnel. One face had been circled in red, a young lieutenant identified as Thomas Reynolds. Another section of wall was dedicated to what they called incursions, breaches where something came through from the other side. Small at first, isolated, contained, but growing more significant with each attempt to communicate with the entity. Reynolds had been there for all of it, rising through the ranks, from junior officer to project head, until 8 months ago, when he suddenly tried to shut everything down. When he died in a car accident. A final display caught my eye, a map tracking what looked like infection sites. Red pins marked locations across Nevada, spreading outward from Nellis in a rough spiral. Beside each pin was a date and a number. The most recent was 3 days ago. The location, the Sundown Motel. With growing dread, I turned to the briefcase on the bed. It was military grade, with a combination lock. I tried the code from the lab, 471969. The locks clicked open. Inside was a syringe filled with blue liquid, a small electronic device that looked like a modified taser, and a final note. The infection spreads through the nervous system. The compound will slow it down, but not stop it. The device disrupts its ability to alter your perception, point at your reflection, and activate when the shifts occur. Neither is a permanent solution. By now, you've seen the map. You've noticed the pattern. The entity doesn't just corrupt individuals, it creates nodes, focal points where reality itself begins to break down. You're becoming one such node. There's only one permanent solution. You already know what it is. I'm sorry, Cooper, I tried to warn them. I tried to stop it. Now it's up to you. If you're still yourself enough to read this, you're still yourself enough to make the right choice. Reynolds. A cold clarity washed over me. I understood now why Reynolds had driven his car off Route 93. He hadn't fallen asleep at the wheel. He hadn't been silenced by the government. He'd made a choice, the only choice available when your body and mind are being colonized by something that wants to unmake reality itself. I picked up the syringe with trembling hands. As I rolled up my sleeve, I caught sight of my reflection in the motel mirror. What looked back wasn't me anymore. It had my general shape, but the proportions were wrong, the features fluid and shifting. And behind what had been my eyes, something vast and ancient and hungry peered out at the world. I plunged the needle into my arm and pushed the plunger home. Fire spread through my veins from the injection site. My back arched, muscles seizing as the blue compound surged through my bloodstream. I bit down on my forearm to keep from screaming, tasting copper as my teeth broke skin. When the initial wave of pain subsided, I lay trembling on the motel room floor, sweat-soaked and gasping. The curtains seemed to breathe, pulsing inward and outward. The ceiling rippled like water. But when I grabbed the electronic device and pointed it at the mirror, activating it with a click, the distortions cleared temporarily. Reality reasserted itself, if only for a moment. The device emitted a soft, oscillating hum that made my fillings vibrate. In the mirror, my reflections stabilized, haggard, pale, but human. My shadow on the wall, however, remained warped and wrong. I checked my watch. 7:23 a.m. The injection had bought me time, but how much? Hours, days, minutes. I needed to understand what I was dealing with, what was happening to me. I turned back to the walls of information Reynolds had left behind. A section I hadn't examined closely detailed the entity's nature, compiled from decades of research and observation. It didn't have a name, at least not one pronounceable by human vocal cords. The scientists had simply called it the Visitor. According to Reynolds' notes, it existed primarily in a reality with physical laws vastly different from our own. It wasn't malevolent in any human sense. It was simply incompatible with our universe. Its presence warped the fabric of reality around it, like a bowling ball on a rubber sheet. When Project Threshold first made contact, the entity had seemed benign, even cooperative. It provided insights into physics that advanced the program by decades. But Reynolds had eventually realized the truth. It wasn't helping them. It was changing them. Preparing them. Making them compatible with its reality rather than their own. The anchors I'd seen in those tanks weren't communication tools. They were conversion nodes. Human bodies and minds remade to serve as conduits between worlds. I stared at the syringe lying empty on the carpet. What had I just injected into my body? Another note taped beside the mirror provided an answer. Compound B67 temporarily stabilizes quantum coherence in organic tissue. Disrupts the entity's ability to rewrite cellular structure. Side effects include auditory visual hallucinations, memory fragmentation, and potential organ failure. Not a cure. Maximum effectiveness? 6 to 8 hours per dose. 6 to 8 hours. A reprieve, not a solution. I gathered the remaining documents, searching for anything that might help more permanently. Most of the research focused on containment rather than elimination. The entity appeared virtually indestructible by conventional means. One report caught my attention. Dated 3 years ago, it detailed an experiment where an infected subject was exposed to a specific electromagnetic frequency. The infection hadn't been cured, but it had been forced into dormancy, unable to spread further within the host or to external targets. The subject, Thomas Reynolds. That explained how he'd managed to maintain enough of himself to leave this trail of breadcrumbs. He'd found a way to contain the infection, to coexist with it without being completely overwritten. But the report noted a critical limitation. The effect was temporary. Eventually, the entity adapted, evolved past the suppression. Reynolds had bought himself time, just as I was trying to do now. I checked my reflection again. Still me, mostly. But there was something in my eyes, a subtle wrongness, a depth that shouldn't be there. The window blinds suddenly rattled, though there was no breeze. Outside, a car door slammed. I peered through the curtains. A black SUV had pulled into the motel parking lot. Two men in dark suits emerged, moving with the distinctive precision of government agents, or what looked like government agents. How had they found me so quickly? Had Reynolds' motel room been under surveillance? Or was this something else? The entity, spreading, creating duplicates as it had with Mercer. I needed to leave. Now. But first, I grabbed the electronic device, the remaining papers from the walls detailing the containment frequency, and a second syringe I found hidden in the bathroom medicine cabinet. As I slipped out the back window, I heard the motel room door splinter open behind me. A voice that might have been human called out my name. I ran across the desert behind the motel, the morning sun already heating the sand. My car was compromised, too visible. I needed another way out. About half a mile from the motel, I found a gas station with a small convenience store. My reflection in the window looked increasingly distorted, but the cashier, a bored teenager, didn't seem to notice anything amiss when I asked to use the phone. I called the only person I could think of who might help, Ramirez, my supervisor, the man who'd assigned me to Section 7B in the first place. "Ramirez," he answered on the third ring, voice groggy with sleep. "It's Cooper. Listen carefully. I need a ride. Don't ask questions, don't tell anyone, and come alone." A pause. "Cooper, where the hell are you? Base security's been looking everywhere for..." I said don't ask questions. There's been a breach at Section 7B, Project Threshold. You know what I'm talking about. His sharp intake of breath told me he did. Jesus Christ, how bad? Bad enough that I'm being hunted. Bad enough that I don't know who to trust. Another pause. "Where are you?" The grogginess was gone now, replaced by a focused intensity I recognized from my military days. I gave him the location of the gas station. 1 hour. If you're not alone, or if anything seems off, I'm gone. I'll be there. I hung up, paid for a bottle of water with my last few dollars, and headed back outside. The desert heat was rapidly becoming oppressive, the sun a white-hot eye in the sky. I found shade behind the building and waited, watching the road for any sign of the black SUV. As I waited, something stirred in my mind. Thoughts that weren't mine, memories I'd never experienced. A vast, shifting world of fluid matter and energy. Beings of pure consciousness, unbound by physical form. A hunger for expansion, for connection, for assimilation of all things into a greater whole. I shook my head violently, trying to dislodge the alien thoughts, but they persisted, bubbling up from some newly awakened part of my mind. "We are not your enemy, James Cooper. We are your future, the future of all things." "Get out of my head," I whispered, pressing my palms against my temples. "We cannot. We are already part of you as you are becoming part of us. The barriers between us are dissolving." I activated the electronic device again, pointing it at my reflection in a puddle of water. The alien presence receded slightly. 50 minutes after my call, a dusty pickup truck pulled into the gas station. Ramirez, alone, as promised. I approached cautiously, watching for any sign that he wasn't himself. He looked exhausted, eyes bloodshot, stubble darkening his normally clean-shaven face, but human, normal. "Cooper, what the hell happened to you?" he asked as I climbed into the passenger seat. "You look like shit." Drive, I said. Head north on Route 93, I'll explain on the way. As he pulled back onto the highway, I watched his shadow on the dashboard. It matched his movements perfectly, no extra appendages, no strange distortions. Base went into lockdown at about 0400 hours, Ramirez said. Some kind of containment breach in a restricted area. Then a massive power surge fried half the electrical systems. They're saying it was an experimental weapons test gone wrong. It wasn't a weapon, I said. It was a doorway to somewhere else, and something came through. I told him everything. The rules, the archway, Major Reynolds, the entity, the infection spreading through me. I showed him the notes I'd taken from the motel, the device, the second syringe. Ramirez listened without interrupting, eyes fixed on the road ahead. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. I've been at Nellis for 15 years, he finally said. Heard rumours about Section 7B, weird experiments, personnel who went in and came out different. Never knew what to believe. He glanced at me. Until now. You believe me? I believe something fucked up is happening, and I believe you're in the middle of it. He tapped the steering wheel thoughtfully. So, what's the plan? I pulled out the papers detailing the electromagnetic frequency that had temporarily suppressed Reynolds' infection. There's a research facility in Ely, private, not military. They might have equipment that can generate this frequency. It won't cure me, but it could buy me time to figure out what to do next. Ely's 3 hours north, Ramirez said. You gonna make it that long or free? I checked my watch. 8:47 a.m. The injection was still working, but I could feel it wearing off. The edges of my vision occasionally blurred, reality flickering like a bad TV signal. I have one more dose, I said, patting my pocket where the second syringe rested. Should get me there. Ramirez nodded and pressed harder on the accelerator. The truck sped up, eating away the miles of empty desert highway. We rode in silence for a while. The landscape outside was monotonous, sand, scrub brush, distant mountains shimmering in the heat. You said Reynolds left you a note, Ramirez said eventually, that he mentioned a permanent solution. What did he mean? I stared out the window, watching my distorted reflection in the side mirror. I think you know. Ramirez's hands tightened on the steering wheel. There has to be another way. Maybe. That's why we're going to Ely. But even as I said it, I knew Reynolds had been right. The entity couldn't be removed once it had taken hold. It could only be contained, either through increasingly complex technological interventions or through the simplest, most permanent method of all. My watch read 9:16 a.m. when the truck's engine suddenly sputtered and died. We coasted to a stop on the shoulder of the empty highway. What happened? I asked. Ramirez frowned at the dashboard. No idea, it was running fine. He tried the ignition. Nothing. Not even a click. The air around us seemed to thicken, the light taking on a strange, yellowish quality. My skin prickled with static electricity. I looked at Ramirez. His shadow on the door beside him was changing, stretching, developing protrusions that waved like seaweed in a current. Ramirez, I said slowly, reaching for the door handle. When exactly did they tell you about the containment breach at Section 7B? He turned to me, his face still human, still normal. Around 0500, when the lockdown. He stopped, realizing his mistake. I'd never told him the time of the breach. You were there, weren't you? I said. In Section 7B, before. His face crumpled into a sad smile. We all were, Cooper. Everyone at Nellis. For years. We just didn't know it. His features began to shift, subtle at first, then with increasing fluidity. Not into something monstrous, but into something that wasn't quite Ramirez anymore. I'm sorry, he said, his voice overlapping with others I recognized. Mercer, Wells, my father. But we can't let you reach Ely. I lunged for the door handle as the thing that wasn't Ramirez reached for me with too many fingers. I burst from the truck, hitting the ground hard and rolling across the sun-baked asphalt. Pain lanced through my shoulder, but adrenaline pushed it aside. I scrambled to my feet and ran. Behind me, what had been Ramirez emerged from the driver's side. It, moved with unnatural grace, each step covering more ground than should have been possible. "Cooper," it called, Ramirez's voice layered with others. "You can't outrun this. You can't outrun what you're becoming." The highway stretched empty in both directions, desert extending to the horizon on either side. No cover, nowhere to hide, just open ground and merciless sun. I sprinted across the road and into the desert, boots kicking up dust. Creosote bushes and stunted Joshua trees offered minimal concealment. My only advantage was that I still had the electronic device and the second syringe. The device was in my hand, its weight reassuring. I activated it as I ran, and the world around me stabilized slightly. The distortions at the edge of my vision receded, but the thing wearing Ramirez's face wasn't affected. It pursued steadily, never quite running, but never falling behind either. "The device won't save you," it called. "It only affects perception, not reality. And reality is what's changing, James. Your reality. Our reality. Soon to be one and the same." My breath came in ragged gasps, lungs burning from exertion and the dry desert air. The injection was wearing off faster than expected, perhaps accelerated by stress and physical activity. I needed to find shelter, a place to regroup and use the second dose. About half a mile from the highway, I spotted a rocky outcropping rising from the desert floor. Not much, but better than nothing. I changed course, pushing my burning legs harder. The rocks formed a small cluster of natural sandstone formations, eroded by millennia of wind and rain into strange, almost organic shapes. As I drew closer, I realized the formation contained small caves and overhangs, potential hiding places. I glanced back. The Ramirez thing was still following, its form seeming to flicker between Ramirez and something else as it moved. Something with proportions that hurt to look at directly. I scrambled up the rocks, finding a narrow crevice that opened into a shallow cave. Cool shadow enveloped me as I pressed myself against the back wall, trying to quiet my desperate breathing. The second syringe was still in my pocket, undamaged despite my fall and flight. I pulled it out with trembling hands, uncapped the needle, and found a vein in my arm. Just as I was about to inject, a voice spoke from the darkness beside me. "That won't help you anymore." I jerked away, nearly dropping the syringe. In the shadows of the cave, barely visible, sat a figure I recognized immediately. Major Thomas Reynolds. He looked surprisingly normal. A man in his 50s, military short grey hair, wearing a simple white button-down shirt and khakis. Only his eyes betrayed something wrong, too dark, too deep, like looking into wells that descended forever. "You're not real," I said, backing toward the cave entrance. "You're just another manifestation, like Ramirez, like Mercer." Reynolds shook his head. "I'm as real as anything is now, which isn't saying much." He gestured to the syringe in my hand. "The compound won't work a second time. The entity adapts quickly, learns from each exposure." "Then what will work?" I demanded, still holding the syringe ready. "The electromagnetic frequency you wrote about. Temporarily. Everything is temporary except the infection itself." His voice was resigned, weary. "I've been fighting it for 3 years, Cooper, using every scientific trick we developed. But it always adapts, always finds a way through the barriers." Outside the cave, I could hear the Ramirez thing moving among the rocks, searching. It was only a matter of time before it found us. "Why are you here?" I asked. "Are you working with it now?" "Fully converted." Reynolds laughed, a hollow sound. "Neither of us is working with anyone. We're being used, colonized. The entity doesn't collaborate. It assimilates." He leaned forward, his face catching the dim light filtering into the cave. "But there are degrees of assimilation. Stages. I've managed to maintain a fragmented sense of self. Enough to try to contain the damage I helped create. The notes you left at the motel, the warning about becoming a node, What did that mean? The entity doesn't just infect individuals. It uses them as anchors to warp reality itself. Focal points where our universe's physical laws begin to break down, becoming more like its native environment. He gestured at me. You're becoming such a focal point. That's why I tracked you down. You've been following me, following the infection's spread. I can sense it now, all the connected parts, all the nodes. His expression darkened. What happened at Section 7B accelerated everything. The entity had been content with slow infiltration until then. Now it's making its move. Outside, the Ramirez thing called my name, its voice distorting midway through, becoming something that made my ears hurt. There's more than one of them out there now, Reynolds said quietly. More duplicates arriving, drawn to your transformation. They want to protect you until the process completes. My skin crawled. What process? The transition from human to gateway, from individual to collective. Reynolds stood, moving with a fluid grace that wasn't quite natural. I came to offer you a choice, Cooper, the same choice I've been avoiding for 3 years. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a pistol, a standard military-issue Beretta M9. He held it out to me, grip first. 1 bullet, he said, the most effective containment method we ever discovered. I stared at the gun, understanding immediately. Suicide. Self-determination, he corrected. Choosing how your story ends. Outside, multiple voices now called my name. Some I recognized, others I didn't. The entity, spreading, creating more duplicates, drawing closer. There has to be another way, I said, even as part of me knew there wasn't. I've spent 3 years looking for one. Reynolds' face was grim. The frequency treatments, the chemical compounds, they just delay the inevitable. And every day I continue to exist, the infection spreads further. His hand remained extended, offering the gun. I should have done this years ago. Instead, I tried to fight it. And look what happened. I thought of the tanks of floating bodies in Section 7B, of the archway pulsing with unholy light, of my own reflection becoming something unrecognizable. Why haven't you done it yourself? I asked. A sad smile. I've tried, many times, but the entity won't let me. It's too integrated with my consciousness now. It senses the intention and stops me. He nodded at the gun. But it can't stop you, not yet. You're still mostly yourself. The voices outside grew louder, closer. Shapes moved at the entrance to the cave. Human silhouettes backlit by the desert sun, but with proportions that seemed to shift and change as they moved. I took the gun. The weight was familiar from my Marine days. I checked the chamber. 1 round, as promised. How do I know this isn't a trick? I asked. How do I know you're not the entity trying to remove a threat? Reynolds' expression remained unchanged. You don't. That's the hell of it, Cooper. Once the infection takes hold, nothing is certain anymore. Not what you see, not what you hear, not even what you think. He stepped back, deeper into the shadows of the cave. All you have is whatever remains of your own judgment. The shapes at the cave entrance resolved into forms that might once have been human. Ramirez, Mercer, others I didn't recognize. They paused as if hesitant to enter. They're afraid of what you might do, Reynolds said softly, of the choice you might make. It's the only power you have left. I looked down at the gun, then at the syringe still clutched in my other hand. 2 options, temporary continuation or permanent end. What happens if I use the gun? I asked. To the infection, to the entity. It loses a potential node, a gateway. It's not destroyed. It can never be destroyed completely, but it's weakened in this reality. Reynolds' voice took on a strange, distant quality. Every host that removes itself is a victory of sorts. Small, but meaningful. The figures at the cave entrance began to move forward now, their movements jerky and uncoordinated, as if they weren't fully in control of their bodies. "Cooper," they called in unison, voices overlapping. "Don't listen. We can help you. We can show you wonders beyond imagining." I looked at my hands. The skin seemed to ripple, the edges of my fingers blurring as if viewed through water. When I pressed my palm against the cave wall, it left an impression that slowly filled in, as if the stone were liquid. The infection was accelerating. "I never asked for this," I said to no one in particular. "I was just doing my job." Reynolds nodded sympathetically. "None of us asked for it. We were just curious, wanted to see what was on the other side." His form began to fade, becoming translucent. "But some doors shouldn't be opened, Cooper. Some knowledge isn't worth the price." The advancing figures were only feet away now, reaching out with hands that weren't quite hands anymore. Time slowed to a crawl. I saw every detail with preternatural clarity, dust motes dancing in the beams of sunlight, the strange fluidity of the approaching figures, the perfect blue of the sky visible beyond the cave entrance. In that frozen moment, I felt the entity fully for the first time, not as an external force, but as a presence within my own mind, ancient, vast, utterly alien, yet somehow familiar, as if it had always been a part of me, waiting to be awakened. "We are becoming, James Cooper. We are evolving. Together we will remake all things." I raised the gun. The figures lunged forward, suddenly desperate. "No!" But they were too late. My finger tightened on the trigger. In that final instant, as the hammer fell, I understood what Reynolds had meant about choices, about self-determination. In a reality where nothing was certain anymore, this one decision, this last human act, was all I had left. The gunshot echoed through the cave like a thunderclap, reverberating off the stone walls. And then, silence. 2 weeks later, the news reports called it a training accident, a weapons system malfunction at Nellis Air Force Base that claimed the lives of 7 research personnel. Official statements emphasized there was no risk to the surrounding communities, no mention of Section 7B, no mention of Project Threshold. Just another classified incident buried under layers of bureaucracy and national security. Dr. Howard Bennett stood at the edge of the cordoned area in the Nevada desert, watching as hazmat-suited figures combed through the rocks. They'd found the body 3 days ago, a security officer who had gone missing during the incident. James Cooper, according to his ID. Apparent suicide, single gunshot wound to the head. "Any changes in the readings?" Bennett asked the technician beside him. The man shook his head, eyes fixed on his instruments. "Still the same, sir. Quantum field distortions consistent with previous sites. Matter density fluctuations. Localized gravitational anomalies." Bennett nodded grimly. Another node. The 5th they'd discovered since the breach at Section 7B. This one centered precisely on the location where Cooper had died. What about the body? "Being transported to the secure facility in Colorado, sir. Same protocols as the others. Same protocols. Which meant the same observations would be made. The cellular abnormalities, the strange crystalline structures replacing organic tissue, the complete rewriting of DNA into something else." Bennett's phone vibrated in his pocket. The caller ID showed a Washington area code, the Oversight Committee demanding updates again. He silenced it. "Pack everything up," he ordered. "We've seen enough here." As the team began dismantling their equipment, Bennett walked a few paces away, staring out at the desert landscape. The sun was setting, painting the sky in bands of orange and purple. Everything looked normal, peaceful, but it wasn't. Not anymore. He pulled a small device from his pocket, similar to the one found clutched in Cooper's dead hand, but more advanced. He activated it and watched as the world around him briefly shifted. The desert rippled like water. The sky deepened to a color that had no name. And in the spaces between things, in the shadows that stretched too long and moved when they shouldn't, he glimpsed something vast and patient, watching. They were running out of time. The nodes were forming faster now, spreading outward from Nellis like a web. Each one a tiny fracture in reality, a beachhead for whatever waited on the other side. Cooper had made his choice, had tried to remove himself from the equation, to deny the entity another gateway. But Bennett knew the truth now. The entity didn't need living hosts anymore. Death wasn't an escape or a solution. It was just another transformation. As he walked back to the waiting helicopter, Bennett felt the familiar pressure building behind his eyes, the whispering thoughts that weren't his own, the subtle wrongness in his reflection that grew more pronounced each day. He thought about Cooper's final choice, about Reynolds before him, wondered if he would have the courage to make the same decision when his time came. But deep down, he knew it wouldn't matter. Whatever this was, whatever had come through that doorway in Section 7B, it was spreading beyond their ability to contain it, beyond bullets or drugs or electromagnetic frequencies. The rules had changed. Reality itself was being rewritten, and all that remained was to see what would emerge when the transformation was complete. If you're reading this, it's already too late. The infection has spread beyond Nellis, beyond Nevada. It's in the water, in the air, in the very ground beneath your feet. You might not see it yet, might not feel it, but it's there, and it's growing. Look closely at your shadow, at your reflection. See the subtle wrongness there? That's how it begins. There are no rules that can save you now.